My name is Benjamin Cunningham. I'm here today to expose a federal judge crime that was committed against me, and I want the public to be aware that a federal judge can commit crimes, and while on the bench, and my story needs to be told to the United States government, Congress, and the world at large. I am a resident of Bronx, New York. I'm a homeowner, a father, a husband, and a landlord. I lost my job due to federal police officers breaking into my home unlawfully, November 29, 2005, because they mistakenly thought that a federal fugitive was residing or hiding inside my home. This is a 3-family house that I purchased with my hard-earned money and savings, legally, and there were no warrants, there were no search warrants, there were no justifications, no consent, and I was handcuffed in my home after these federal agents broke into my house. These agents were from the United States Marshal's office in Manhattan, New York. They claimed that the North Carolina, Charlotte, United States Marshal Service had interviewed a North Carolina, Charlotte, reliable confidential informant that claimed that a fugitive who happened to be my brother, Terrence Cunningham, might be hiding in my home in the Bronx. Federal police officers handcuffed me inside my house and refused to leave after they were unlawfully searching private areas and reading legal documents and logged on to my computer system. So that led me to run outside my home and attract neighbors, any people in the street walking by, to witness what was going on inside my house. Unfortunately, I ran into the street wearing no clothes, wearing federal handcuffs, and I was struck by a local police department bus. This police bus was a New York City Transit police recruits. These police recruits were in transit to the training academy in Bronx, New York. Subsequently, I filed, I notified 911 because the federal police, found out that I was involved in the bus accident wearing their federal police handcuffs. They ordered the New York City Police Department recruit bus to drive away, don't report the crime. Afterwards, the federal police officers carried me back inside my home, released the federal handcuffs, told me to go seek medical attention on my own, and then they ran outside my home and quickly drove away from my house or neighborhood. Afterwards, I notified 911, who responded along with EMS. A police report was filed, but my local police department told me they were under strict orders not to provide a copy of the police report to me. Therefore, at the same time, I was transported to the local hospital, St. Barnabas Hospital in the Bronx, where I was later discharged. Several days later, I proceeded to the Bronx County District Attorney Office, who advised me to report this incident to the New York State Crime Victim Board Agency. The New York State Crime Victim Board Agency, as a result, told me, Mr. Cunningham, we cannot provide New York State crime victim benefits to you based upon what happened in your house, because the New York City Police Department and the United States Federal Marshal Police Agency refused to provide police reports to us. If we can just receive federal police reports in addition to the New York City police report, we can process your claim and provide New York State crime victim benefits. After that, I contacted a federal attorney who filed a $25 million lawsuit against the United States Federal Marshal Agency inside the federal courthouse in Manhattan, New York. The case was assigned to Judge Deborah A. Batts and Magistrate Kevin A. Fox. In the meantime, while my civil rights case was pending against the United States Federal Marshal Service, I filed a federal crime victim agency application to the Federal Crime Victim Agency in New York. That federal agency is located inside the FBI agency office. The Federal Crime Victim Agency set up an appointment for me to meet with the FBI agent. The reason for the set up meeting with the FBI agency because the FBI special agent was directed to conduct an FBI intake interview with me concerning federal crime victim application benefits. Several weeks later, I proceeded to the FBI agency where the intake interview was conducted. The FBI agent, Christina L. Norris, she told me, Mr. Cunningham, I don't make any decisions on your federal crime victim application. What I will do is process the application up to the U.S. Attorney's Office. They make the decision whether or not you receive federal crime victim status. Also, I provided to her the New York State Crime Victim Agency's denial decision. The FBI agent also informed me that she will conduct an FBI investigation against the U.S. Marshal Service police who unlawfully invaded my house and directed local police department officials who injured my body with their police department vehicle to drive away. Afterwards, my attorney proceeded to process my civil rights case in Manhattan, New York. Judge Deborah Batts, the federal judge beat up all over my federal attorney, constantly bickering with my federal attorney, where the federal attorney abandoned my case, which led me to proceed as my own attorney. And the judge dismissed my civil rights case based upon attorney disobedience. That led me to file a notice of appeal, and I hired an appellate attorney, which cost me $7,000 to hire this attorney. This attorney processed my appeal, and in the middle of the appeal, while the appeal was pending, we found out that the federal judge, Deborah Batts, she notified the appellate judges upstairs in the appeals court, and she told the appeals court, she admitted that she was wrong for dismissing the lawsuit based upon the attorney's misconduct, which had nothing to do with me, and the appeals court reversed her on abuse of discretion, sent the case back to her. Once my civil lawsuit was returned from the federal appeals court back to the federal judge, the federal judge ordered a settlement conference where the government said, Mr. Cunningham, we will give you $30,000 to walk away from this lawsuit. I rejected the $30,000 lawsuit settlement offer from the government. The U.S. Attorney Office, David Bober, Assistant U.S. Attorney, made the offer in the presence of Magistrate Judge Fox. The reason why I rejected the $30,000 settlement offer from the government attorney is because my medical bills from the police bus accident is $29,000. So why would I accept a $30,000 settlement from the government? So the magistrate judge was so enraged that I rejected the government $30,000 settlement, he sent the case back over to the assigned judge. The difference between a magistrate judge and a full federal judge on a civil rights case is that the magistrate judge is supposed to assist the federal judge on the case with the small issues so the judge can make a final determination. The federal judge said that, well, the magistrate judge should hold a Fourth Amendment hearing to determine whether or not the police is guilty of the Constitution violations that occurred at my house. The magistrate held such hearing, and the magistrate discovered that the government, one, refused to provide any evidence that a North Carolina confidential informant guided the federal police into my home in New York. Two, the magistrate also discovered, as a result, that the government did indeed violate the Fourth Amendment, which is unreasonable search and seizure. The magistrate report was sent to the federal judge on the case, and she said, well, what I'm going to do, since Mr. Cunningham rejected the $30,000, is I'm going to dismiss this case by giving the federal police agent immunity. They were wrong for violating the Fourth Amendment, but I'm going to give them qualified immunity because it's not their fault, the federal police fault, for breaking into Mr. Cunningham's home unlawfully. It's the confidential informant fault who resides in North Carolina. Where in North Carolina is this person? I'm a homeowner. I deserve to know who in North Carolina made this authorization. Who is this person? A woman? A male? Rich? Poor? Black? White? Whatever. I don't know to this day. So when the federal judge dismissed my lawsuit, I hired the same appellate attorney who won my first appeal against the same federal judge. This attorney, my appellate attorney, filed a timely notice of appeal against this judge. And the federal appeals court blocked his access into the federal appeals court by dismissing the appeal. They decided the lower court's decision, without the government filing any papers or legal brief, without my attorney filing any legal papers or brief, without the lower court record being transferred upstairs to the appellate court. So how did the appellate court decide that my appeal is frivolous? After that, my appellate attorney filed a notice of appeal to the United States Supreme Court in Washington, D.C. They refused to allow my attorney to enter with my case. Subsequently, I filed a judicial misconduct complaint against the federal judge, Deborah Batts, in New York. I filed a judicial misconduct complaint also against her magistrate judge, Kevin Fox. Why? Because they both fabricated up a North Carolina confidential informant who never exists. The government never produced this person from North Carolina, never produced any documents from Charlotte, North Carolina. So why are these federal police officers in New York walking around with qualified immunity when there were no qualified immunity evidence presented to anybody? My federal appellate attorney charged me $15,000 down payment, and I owe him a $40,000 legal balance for my appellate case, even though The Federal Appeals Court and the United States Supreme Court never allowed this attorney to process my appeal. So how did I lose $15,000 and owe $40,000 when I never had a right to appeal the corrupted, illegal decision from the lower court federal judge Deborah A. Batts? I filed a judicial misconduct complaint to the chief judge of the federal court. The chief judge dismissed my judicial misconduct complaint as harassment. I filed an appeal against the chief judge to the same judges in the federal appeals court that work under the chief judge. They called judicial council judges. The judicial council judges who receive a paycheck from the chief judge will never rule against the chief judge in my favor, so they decided to rule with the chief judge against me. After that, I discovered there's another level of appeal. Appealing a judicial misconduct complaint once you are dissatisfied with the judicial council judge's decision. That is, at the United States Judicial Conference Agency, rather they call the United States Court of Office Administration, or the Thurgood-Marshall Building, that's located in Washington, D.C. That's where all the federal court annual budget comes from. The Judicial Conference Agency in Washington, D.C. wrote me a letter back saying, Mr. Cunningham, we refuse to investigate the Judicial Council judges in the Federal Appeals Court in New York because the entire Judicial Council judges ruled in favor of the chief. After that, I filed an impeachment investigation complaint against the federal judge to my Congressman Jose Serrano. He is my congressman who represents my district in New York inside the United States Congress in Washington. My congressman staff told me, the congressman said, Mr. Cunningham, because the Judicial Conference, the Judicial Council judges, the federal chief judge ruled against you, I'm not going to help you, even though you're my constituent. So I filed an impeachment investigation complaint inside the United States Congress House Judiciary Committee. The House Judiciary Committee told me, Mr. Cunningham, you are a member of the public. We can't help you investigating a federal judge's crime. Why? Because it's your congressman's job to bring this issue to us. If your congressmen don't bring this issue to our attention, we can't accept your complaint. Well, I said my congressman refused to help me. So they said to me, the House Judiciary Committee staff, Mr. Cunningham, go find another congressman to endorse your case to us. Totally impossible. When I tried that, I went to several congressional members inside Congress, and they all told me, you're not a constituent of ours, you're not even from our state. So I went and proceeded to approach congressional members from my state, other part that represent other congressional districts in New York. And they told me, Mr. Cunningham, you're not a constituent from our district. Okay. So at that point, that led me to file a Freedom of Information lawsuit in Washington, D.C. The FOIA agency, which means Freedom of Information, I filed 2 Freedom of Information lawsuits at the FOIA agency in Washington, D.C. One, I asked the government, 4 agencies, to search their records for documents relating to why I was denied federal crime victim benefits by the FBI agent and her boss, who is a United States attorney for the government. Two, I filed a Freedom of Information request in Washington for production of documents concerning a North Carolina confidential informant. The results are amazing. What came out of the Freedom of Information lawsuits, unbelievable. One, the result relating to the federal crime victim decision was the FBI approached, the FBI in a sworn affidavit stated, we cannot find any information in our FBI agency database regarding your interview seeking federal crime victim benefits with one of our FBI agent employees. We searched and combed through 3 FBI agency computer systems. But because you filed an exhibit in your FOIA request, which is the FBI agent business card with her name, we approached the FBI agent and said, do you know Mr. Cunningham? Did he file for federal crime victim benefits back in 2008? Remind me, this is 2013 now. She said, oh, I don't remember Mr. Cunningham. That was several. So they said, well, if you don't remember Mr. Cunningham from 2008, we're in 2013 now. Where did you get this business card of yours from? All of a sudden, she came out of amnesia and said, oh, I do remember Mr. Cunningham. Oh, he did apply for federal crime victim benefits, but guess what? I didn't process the application. I kept everything as my personal notes. When I got a copy of that response, I asked my congressman to report the FBI agent to the FBI director in Washington, D.C. My congressman, Jose Serrano, refused to do so again. The second Freedom of Information lawsuit response from the agency said, we can't locate any documents relating to the North Carolina confidential informant. Remind you, these are the federal agency response. These are the same federal agency, U.S. Marshal Service, the United States Attorney Office for the government. These two agencies stood up in New York and testified to a federal judge under sworn affidavits that a North Carolina confidential informant directed the federal agents to unlawfully invade my house in New York. That was back in 2010. This Freedom of Information lawsuit reveals that these two same agencies stated to me in 2013 in a Freedom of Information lawsuit sworn affidavit, we neither deny nor admit that this person exists, that these documents exist. That was the U.S. Marshal Service agency. And the U.S. Attorney Office said, we're invoking confidentiality rights. But the agencies told me as a result, go file a lawsuit in federal court. I did in Washington, D.C. The federal judge in Washington, D.C. knows that this evidence is very harmful against the federal judge in New York because I made her aware that I need this evidence because I plan to file additional evidence to the United States Congress against the federal judge in New York who faked up, invented up a person in North Carolina that never was born in this world in order to help the government get around a lawsuit, my $25 million lawsuit. All because I rejected a $30,000 settlement offer. That's where I'm at today. I traveled from New York to California in order to conduct this interview because I plan to bring this issue to the United Nations in a human rights complaint because my house is now in foreclosure status. This is a 3-family house. I'm responsibly obligated to my tenants who are working class people. I can no longer afford to pay my mortgage. I can no longer afford to pay water bill and etc. to this house. And I have a school-aged daughter. We need heat. We don't need to be evicted. I shouldn't be in this financial situation because I wasn't committing a crime in my home. I was asleep. When my house was attacked and invaded by armed police, federal police, with their guns drawn, dragging me out my house, handcuffing me, for what? What did I do to deserve that? What did I deserve? Why was I injured by a police department vehicle in New York City and nobody reported it? It was all covered up by the FBI agency, the U.S. Marshal Service agency, by a New York federal judge. Where is justice in this country? The United States Congress, everybody is covering this crime up. Therefore, I'm on my way to the United Nations. Secondly, but lastly, the federal attorney in Washington who's defending the government in my Freedom of Information lawsuit had the audacity to tell me go file a homeowner's insurance claim. I did. Why? The federal attorney said, Mr. Cunningham, you already lost the case in New York because of a North Carolina confidential informant, and we're not going to give you those documents in this Freedom of Information lawsuit. So, I filed a homeowner's insurance claim with Tower Insurance Group and with State Farm Insurance. Both insurance companies told me, Mr. Cunningham, we're denying your claim because there's no category. Unfortunately, we feel bad what happened to you in your home, but we can't grant this claim and we're going to deny the claim. And you can provide our written insurance claim denial to the federal judge in Washington, D.C., who's presiding over this Freedom of Information lawsuit. So, end result, in conclusion, this is supposed to be democracy. This is not. This is supposed to be federal justice in this country. It is not. There's a statue, a female statue holding an equal scale in all federal courts throughout the United States. And that's false advertisement because these federal judges are scamming American citizens out of their federal lawsuits in order to help the government get around federal justice in violation of the civil rights and the Constitution rights. American civil liberties have been trampled upon. I am a poster child, a postal person, postal man, postal boy, whatever you want to call, whatever you want to label, that the American system for justice has been officially hijacked. And somebody has to stand up. I have a home sitting in the middle of this crisis. As a result, I plan to show the United Nations that this system, federal system in America, is a farce. Thank you very much.